Welcome to a Dash of Life podcast, where every episode brings you a touch of spirit, a pinch of passion, and a zest for life.
Hi, welcome to episode 6 of the Dash of Life podcast, where we are contrasting men versus women. And as you know, there are many strong opinions about what each gender, if you will, should do and perform within their societal duties, but also at home and as well as just fulfilling their own purpose. There are very distinct opinions and expectations about roles, superiority, leadership, expectations on self control. And I believe from a societal standpoint, we need to change the narratives surrounding men versus women. This episode will focus on how both can show a deeper love and mutual respect for the other. We focus on hierarchy or the lack thereof, roles, loving more, communication, physical, emotional strength, as well as embracing each other, but also emphasizing in the power of a woman. When we support a woman's autonomy and ambition, the recognition of the power of nurturing, challenging gender norms, learning from women's leadership styles, uplifting women in public as well as private. And, we tap into a resource that is, I hate to say rarely used, but I would say maybe underutilized potential in women and power that they have based off of living in a male dominated society. We'll also focus on respecting men in their natural instincts to provide and protect, to drive, recognize a male's needs or a man's needs for independence, problem solving approaches, as well as decision making, and strength but vulnerability within men. And I'll tell you right now that I'm going to have to do a part 2 for this because when I was writing this out, there's no way that I'm going to get all this in 30 minutes. So you will have a part 2 of this episode number 6. And again, I'm just going to say as we start this that there will be some generalizations made, but it's to talk about the points, right? And you will never, and I'll always repeat this, you will never hear me say that there are all of one of something. Either all men act the same, all women act the same. No. You will never hear me say that because I know everyone is different. Everyone brings their own perspective, but for the purposes of the discussion and the arguments in this case, there will be generalizations made. All right, so I'm excited for episode 6. I hope that you are enjoying this podcast so far. And let's get into this. And then later on, we'll talk about what part 2 will entail. I would also like to, before we start, I would like to emphasize that this episode is a basis for perspective. I am of the position of if someone feels deeply within their spirit that they need to do something, then by all means, they should be able to do it. If there's no harm involved and it is a positive contribution to society. And I mean this in terms of what they are called to do in life. Deep down, people know what they are called to do. They know what they get excited about. They know their passions. And so if they are truly called to do something, we should not, as society, uh, dim that within them and control that and prevent that. It's very important, I think, for all of us to show up in our gifts. There are so many different restrictions, I feel, from like a societal standpoint. There are so many different restrictions that we put on people in general, not even just man versus woman, but for people in general. How do you know somebody can't do something if they've never done it before? People are very intuitive. They can figure it out for the most part, right? Like if you teach somebody something, they'll be able to do it and reciprocate that. So in that instance, I feel like from a societal standpoint, we need to be open to that, right? This notion that, somebody cannot do something. How do we know? We don't know that for sure unless we know that they've tried, they made all these attempts and they just can't do it. They don't have maybe the physical capability of doing it or the mental capacity to do it. So I think we need to be open as society that people can do things if they are allowed to and encouraged to do so. You're talking about kids, like if we think about kids in school, you know, kids, they think that they can't do something, but if they have an encouraging teacher, then that's just a boost in their esteem and a boost in their confidence. Having someone behind them that says, "You can do this. I know you can do it." So, from a societal standpoint, I feel like we need to keep ourselves open to what people's capabilities are and not kind of box them in and restrict them from either experiencing it or demonstrating that they can do it. But anyway, I digressed a little bit, but you get the point, right? Like from a societal standpoint, we need to be open that men can do things, women can do things. There's this notion that women are inferior to men. I do not believe that. I do not subscribe to that. And I do not believe that God intended that. I feel like that is something that man has created through his own lens so that he can stay in control, and that he can confine a woman. There are men out here, let's just be honest, there are men out here who believe that women should just stay home, have babies, and take care of the house, right? We still have that mentality. Although in the last episode, I talked about that where we need a two-parent household nowadays. We're not living in the 60s, in the 50s, or the 40s where women stayed home. We financially cannot, a lot of households cannot afford that. But also there's the other piece of that too, like what is the woman called to do? What is her purpose in life? A lot of people will say, God's design is that the woman is a helpmate. I believe that a woman is a helpmate for a man, with the caveat or with saying that she is using her superpowers to help the man reach his full potential. And I feel like if we're in a relationship, that is the best example of man versus woman. Women are so powerful, and if they use their power to uplift their man, then they're unstoppable. And I feel like that God knew what he was doing when he created the woman, not to be inferior of the man per se. And I'll get into that in a little bit later about submission and things like that from what I believe and what I've read. But if we truly have a relationship where one uplifts the other, that's a very powerful thing. And maybe that needs to be the test, and that needs to be the litmus test of relationships. When you have both entities coming as they are, but they're uplifting and empowering the other one. Who can beat them? And as they empower each other, I believe that the woman is not less than the man. I don't know. Could have been, a rhetoric to say and stroke male ego and pride. I don't think that's God's intent when he created the woman, is to have her treated as if she was inferior to man. And I'll get into that and specifically, more specifically, part 2 of this episode. My understanding of God's creation of woman was to complement man's abilities. And we are very different creatures, very different creatures. However, in my mind, and maybe the way that God designed it, I don't know, I didn't have a conversation with him, but maybe the way that God designed it is, I'm going to create her to do this, and I'm going to create him to do this. So when they come together, we have something very powerful. When we talk about submission, yes, the Bible talks about a woman submitting to her husband, or being under and allowing the husband to lead, right? Submitting herself to him. But also, that's under the auspice that the man is submitted to God. And what we find is that man has created his own version through his own lens of what that looks like. And I think that the expectations that man has assigned woman creates this position of a hierarchy, if you will, and that he has created the narrative around how and what a woman should submit to her husband through his own lens, indicating that she is less than. I don't think that was God's design. I really don't. But when we talk about submission and a woman being submitted to her husband, we also have to talk about the man being submitted to God. And I feel like there are a lot of men out here who pick and choose how they are going to submit to God. I could be wrong, but their actions pretty much tell us. And I'm not bashing men. This is not the point of this. It's point of discussion to say that, because this is where a lot of problems lie within relationships, is because man wants a woman to submit to him, but he's not submitted to God. So how can a woman submit to a man who, one, is not leading, doesn't know where he's going, doesn't know what his purpose, his life purpose is from God, but he wants to control and manipulate, and he wants to do as he pleases? How can a woman submit to that? If you're not taking care of what you need to do, how do I know you're going to take care of me as a woman? So, just some questions to ask as we further this conversation about submission. As I mentioned, many men, basically, they pick and choose what aspects of their life that they want to submit to God. And I will always say that there are outliers for each. There are some women out here who pick and choose how they want to submit their life to God. And I think that's where we're all amiss. We really are a mess. I believe that our families are a hot mess. And if you think about it, it's an orderly process. Again, I'll just say that there are many men out here who have completely submitted their life to God. No one's perfect. You will never hear me say that either. Our actions are not perfect. Are we perfectly made in God's eyes? I believe that. And I talked about that last episode. But there are many men who are submitted to their own desires. And God is nowhere in it. And we see that on a daily basis based off of what they attend to, where they put their attention, how many women they have. People can argue that, man is polyamorous, but I'm speaking from the design of God, from what I believe in God's design. I don't believe that when you're in a committed relationship and you're truly committed, there's room for other people to be in that. I don't believe that at all. And I think that leaves the door open for creating soul ties with people, opening and creating specific expectations, disappointments, jealousy, all of that. I think all of that occurs when you start bringing others into the relationship. And then if they are, if they have other relationships on the side of you, then you're bringing all of that energy and all those spirits into you. And I feel like that's not how it needs to be or how it should be. Anyway, so reiterating, I believe that God's design is to have the man lead the household. And I think if you think about it, that doesn't mean that the woman is in this hierarchy, right? Like the man is head of household and then the woman is beneath that. But I feel like society kind of dictates that narrative from a male dominated society. Like I'm supposed to be the head of the household. There's a lot of ego attached to that. And that I feel like that doesn't work. That's not God's design. So if God has given a woman a specific talent, then by all means, she needs to pursue that and not conform to what society is telling her. And we talk about that last episode too. She should not feel obligated to not come into her true self and come into her calling. I think the most powerful couples are where, and I think I mentioned this already, but I feel like the most powerful couples are where each one comes into themselves and then the woman is submitted to God, but she's still a participant, a very active participant in the relationship and what goes on in the relationship. And the man, regarding his own instincts, is there to provide and protect. And honestly, if a man is there and he's active and he's providing and he's, protecting and he's submitted to God, then there's nothing wrong with a woman submitting to a man like that. And I think that's how it should be. Like, he has to be comfortable in his own process, right? In his own abilities to uplift her and encourage her, but also showing her that he can lead, he can do. And I think that piece of it goes really well and is working really well. said it already, that that is a very powerful couple. All right, so I'm going to pivot a little bit because this may go back to humanity, just period, just on the basis of humanity. But I feel like if we look at, and if a man or a woman looks at that other person or the opposite sex, um, opposite gender, from the perspective or through the lens that God made them, then they have no choice but to respect who they are. And I feel like that's people in general. If we go back to and just look at people from a humanity perspective and how they contribute or how their life contributes to this world, then there's automatically like an aspect of respect to that. Right? Am I right? Am I wrong? That's how I feel. Like, I feel like if we take a step back and look at what this person is contributing to the world, to society, regardless of our views of them, if we just go back to that and look at this is what this person is contributing to society, then there's got to be some sort of respect level there. We have way too many people that are lost in a world where they are trying to conform to what society is telling them, and they're miserable because they are not fully showing up as themselves. And if we view them through God's lens, then it makes it so much easier to love them, honor them, and respect them. And I'm going to keep saying it because I feel like there's such an emphasis on role or the attainment of a role, a specific role, that we disregard the individual as they are. And I strongly believe, that if a partnership is going to work, if a marriage is going to work, then each person comes completely and fully whole to the relationship. And because nowadays, a lot of this has changed, and there are some that don't present their entire self in the beginning when you're just getting ready, when you're just getting to know somebody, and they don't fully present who they are. And I feel like there's a lot of that going on. So if you want a long-term relationship to last, then you have to completely show up as you are in the beginning. That helps people understand who you are, where you're coming from, and how to love you and understand you. So that's a key component as well. We have to be able to do that and feel comfortable with that. I sound like a therapist, but maybe this is therapy for you. But I hope this is helping. And I haven't even gotten real far, so maybe this is going to be 3 parts, but I hope that this is resonating with you and helping you understand that women are not less than men, but society will dictate and tell us that. But we see examples of women living in their own right, showing up with their superpowers to not only empower men, but to drive change in our country, drive change in our society, coming with a different perspective. So that's the focus. All right, so I'm just going to pivot a little bit, talk about marriage to a degree, and then, see how much time we have left. But this really may be 3 parts. We'll see. So I think there is this misunderstanding of what marriage is. A lot of people attach themselves to, oh, I'm going to get married. It's going to be awesome. And, it's going to be all good. And whoa, I think from a basis of understanding what marriage is, marriage is a true commitment. When you say those vows, you are committing to this other person whatever it is that you vowed to them that you're going to carry out throughout the remainder of your lives. And I think where we go amiss or where we go wrong with that is, instead of empowering and uplifting our partners, we have a biased opinion about what they should be at a particular point in time and how they need to be within our understanding, with our own understanding of who they should be. And that's going to set you up for failure every time, because you may have this idea of, well, by this point they should have done this, by this point they should be this, and when we assign that to them, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Now, I'm not saying that like both people don't need to contribute to the marriage and help move the progression of the marriage forward. I'm not saying that at all. But when we attach our own expectations on where they should be, and instead of empowering them to become whoever they need to be, then that's where we run amiss, and that's where we set ourselves up for many reasons for divorce. We leave out what they're assigned to do, and their skills and abilities that they have been given or gifted. We leave that out. And so, how can we put all these expectations on if that's not who they're supposed to be? Just ask them the question, help you think a little bit about that. Because I believe that if we encourage them and empower them with their skills and abilities, then that takes a lot of hurt and a lot of conflict out of the relationship. We have to take a step back and look at it through the lens of, God has given him, her, these talents, and whatever it is that they are pursuing and operating in, then I need to empower them in that. And let's face it, two are better than one. There are so many single parents out here that are doing it on their own. You have one income. You don't have the support, the physical support, but also that coach of a partner that can help you walk through some things, encourage you, that can, just provide relief, even if it's just talking to them. You don't have that. And I feel like that is not how God's design for marriage was or is. Two are always better than one. And I feel like God knew the effectiveness of that kind of relationship, having both operating within their own power. Think about that. That's where we get that term of power couple. They are a power couple. They are enabling each other to operate within their own space independently, but then coming back to the couple fully and completely, and using their own power and just encouraging and pouring into their abilities. They're unstoppable. That, I feel like, is God's design. So when you have people that are constantly in conflict because one's trying to control the other, one is trying to prevent the other, or one is trying to say, well, you need to submit to me. Submit to what? What are you doing that is causing me not to submit to you? What are you doing that is causing me not to be able to lead you? That, I think, is where the crux of our strongest relationships need to be addressed. And that is where we recognize the partnership as a team. You need a team leader, so everybody's on the same page. But then you also empower your team to be successful. A team cannot be accomplished without some sort of order, some sort of plan. And when you talk about teamwork, each person shows up in a particular role. You can't have three captains, or you cannot have three leaders on a team. It's going to get convoluted and confusing, right? Right. Everybody needs to be clear on what the direction is and where the relationship is going. Where is our North Star? What are we working towards and what are we moving towards? So in order for a marriage, a team to be successful, we have to not only work in tandem together, but then we also have to work in tandem with God and understand that for this relationship to completely tap into its insurmountable amount of power, that the entire thing has to be submitted to God. And I feel like, and I believe that it is for this reason that the woman submits to her husband and that the husband submits to God, not because the woman is deemed inferior. All right, so we're out of time, and I'll tell you, I think this is going to be 3 episodes, y'all. We'll see. It might be 2 full episodes as opposed to 30 minutes here and then 20 minutes. It might be 2 full 30-minute episodes. We'll see how the second half of this goes, but thank you for joining me thus far in this episode. And I don't know, I absolutely love this. I love doing these. And I hope that you are getting lots of different perspectives, so that you can remain open and that it's helping in some sort of way. So we will see you on part 2 of episode 6, Man versus Woman, the Dash of Life podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of A Dash of Life podcast. I hope today's conversation added a touch of spirit, a pinch of passion, and a zest for life to your day.